I think everybody should experience what it feels like to walk outside and breathe in negative 60-degree Fahrenheit air. Nothing wakes you up quite like it.
Hey guys, it's Tanner with Built Not Bought, and I would say it's about time that I replace my outfeed table. This workbench that I use as an outfeed table was one of the first things that I ever built, and it's about 4 years old, and I've built tens of thousands of dollars worth of furniture using this workbench. However, as of lately, it has started to, we'll say, fall apart a little bit. And when I'm doing any sort of hand tooling on this, it racks back and forth. A quick appreciation B-roll of the glorious workbench. Now, I'm not ready to retire this quite yet. My plan is to have an outfeed and assembly table right here behind my table saw, and to move this to the back of my shop. And then in the future, I want to build a much heavier, sturdier hand tool workbench, kind of like a Rubo style. Until then, this is still going to suffice for what I needed to do. I have to say, it's a little weird having construction 2x4 from Home Depot sitting right next to my scrap black walnut and white oak, but I'm on a tight budget for this. I don't have a bunch of extra money to spend on it, and $3 for an 8-foot board versus like $80 for an 8-foot board, it's kind of a no-brainer. Now, the first issue that I'm facing with construction lumber is finding boards that are somewhat straight, flat, not cupped, not curved, not twisted, etc. You know how it goes. And then the second is construction lumber is surfaced and it has rounded corners, and I need everything to be nice and square with what I have planned for it. So the first thing I'm going to do is mill all of this construction lumber and get everything nice and square and get these rounded corners much more sharp. And I'm a horrible drawer, but my plan is to make dovetails. Never done them before, believe it or not. This will be the first project with dovetails. So the first thing I'm doing is organizing my construction 2x4s by the bad and the good. And the good are not really all that good, they're just less shitty. I have the length stretchers here, which are at 77.5 inches. These are the ones that are going to go full length on the top and on the bottom. I have my legs here, so they're going to be glued up 2 and 2 to make like a little bit smaller than a 4x4 post. And then here's the 2 out of the 4 side stretchers. Alright, so off camera, I used my Shaper Origin and made a couple templates, and I have 2 because one side of my bench has a shorter post than the other, or a more narrow post. So I have a short version of a positive and a negative, and I'm going to end up using both of these to trace out and cut and maybe even template route onto my actual pieces.
All right, so I clamped up all four corners of the frame of this base. The only issue I had is the top of this blew out. It got so thin in those corners. If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't have made the width of the way end of this dovetail the same width as the actual 2x4s. I would have made it quite a bit more narrow, so that would have had a lot more material at the top, so I wouldn't have had to worry about it tearing out. These are so far from perfect, and I kind of made a mistake with how these all lined up. In my head, I thought they would meet together at the corner and make a really cool fold over. Well, in order to do that, you would have needed to miter the edge of them at a 45-degree angle and then glued them in together. And I glued one in, came back, routed away a new spot or a new mortise, and then glued the other one in. So that did not work out. And I guess this is a good time to say, when you're trying new things, the perfect thing to try them on is shop furniture, because if you screw it up, the only person that has to look at it is you. So I just pocket hold this down to this melamine and sideways into this post so that it's flush across the face. Alright, so I've got my overhang fairly consistent all the way around. I went with 2 inches on the front and back, 1 inch on the side, and then I'm going to trim this out with another 3/4 of a solid wood, probably walnut or white oak, because that's what I have laying around. And you want to use the solid wood on the edges because MDF and laminate chip out very easily, so that's going to make everything really sturdy along the edges. I've got this clamped down, and I'm going to screw in from the bottom into those figure-8 fasteners. Important, I have this center punch drill bit, and you need to pre-drill in it MDF. The other thing is, especially if you're using a driver to put these screws in, you got to be extremely careful. We're just going for snug here. You don't want to over tighten or you'll just rip it out. MDF is notorious for not taking hardware. In fact, it's horrible for taking hardware, so I've just got my fingers crossed that this goes well. I'm going to crawl underneath there. I've got probably close to 20 figure-8 fasteners on this. I really wanted to make sure that it was secured and pulled down everywhere so that the top is nice and flat, because that is kind of the goal here. I'm going to do this off camera because you probably don't want to see me pre-drill and drill 20 screws. On to the fun part. I ordered this roll of vermiculite. It's basically a thin layer of laminate in matte black because I just love the look of matte black. And it's going to go with my end goal aesthetic for the shop. I was able to cut this with my track saw. I wasn't sure how that was going to go, but it cut pretty clean. There wasn't any chip out. And then to apply it to the MDF, you need contact cement.
and you apply contact cement to both surfaces. I did 3 coats on the MDF because it soaked it in so much. Let it get dry to the touch so it's no longer sticky, and then you can set that laminate on top. You need to use sticks so that it doesn't instantly adhere to the surface, and then flatten it from the inside out. How nice does this top look already? Now I left my laminate top about an inch wider all the way around it, and I was going to use a flush trim bit to trim it all up. I was nervous about this because I thought the laminate being super brittle would crack and break as I was trimming it up, but it actually worked perfect and it cut really clean. I ordered these cheap knockoff Bloom undermount drawer slides. Bloom is much better, but they're also so much more expensive, and for shop furniture, on a tight budget, I just could not justify them. They are superior to these. There's no questioning it. But these were like $9 or $10 a piece versus like 40 for Bloom. So it's kind of a no-brainer. They are very tedious to install. I'm using a block as a measurement spacer, so I have even spacing on each side from the bottom all the way to the top. This is a quick little tip that helps things go a lot more smooth, and about 3 to 4 screws in each slide. I'm putting 4 sets of drawers on each side, so that's 8, and then 3 on the side that are a little bit larger for my Festool sustainers. So that's 11 drawer boxes that I need to make. Since I have so many drawers to make, I'm going to skim through the process on how I build them. Just ask me down in the comments below if you have any questions about their construction. I'm just using pocket holes. It's the most efficient way to build drawer boxes, and they are plenty strong. A little bit of glue and some 1/4-inch plywood on the bottom. I do want to state the sidewalls on these drawer slides are meant for 5/8 or 1/2-inch plywood, and I bought 3/4, so I had to plane down the sides of every one of these.
So I bought these cheap undermount drawer slides off of Amazon because the Bloom ones are just way too expensive, especially for shop furniture. I've been looking at $500 or $600 in just drawer slides, so I went with these cheap ones. They said to inset the drawer slides an 1/8 inch back from the face of the cabinet, which I did, but these are sticking out like a 1/4 inch or better, despite being set back an 1/8 of an inch. And I double checked the measurements. My drawers are 15 inches exactly, which is what the drawer slides are. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to pull all of these out and remove the drawer slides from the cabinet, push them back a 1/4 inch. I might even go more than that because I'd rather it stop because the face of these is hitting the frame versus having a gap because they're not closing far enough. I got a lot more work to do.
I'd greatly appreciate it if you guys would like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I put a lot of work into this, and I just had to redo all of this, and it'd make me feel a lot better about it if you did. Thanks.
Much better. Alright, so I'm going to trim this whole thing out in walnut. I just had some scrap laying around in that pile here. This is not very good stuff. A lot of it is bowed and kind of nasty, but I cut this at a 45 here, and then I'm using these bandy clamps. I bought all these a long time ago and have not used them until today. Is going to be the perfect time. All right, so I've got this end pre-cut at 45 already. I matched it up with my face, put a bandy clamp. It's over and on top of this other edge here. So I'm just gonna line this up flush, and then from underneath, I'm going to trace that line. Now, I don't want to cut this line away. I'm gonna stay on the outside, and I'm just going to slowly make a cut, extra long, whatever, come over, check it, and just keep trimming, and sneak up on that line until I get this fitting the way I would like it. So I just made my second cut. The first one I left long, and I'm hoping I didn't cut this one too short. And that looks really good.
Up next, we're working on the drawer fronts for my outfeed table, and you could keep this very simple and just do plain plywood and then get some cheap handles. I wanted to make this look a little bit more interesting, and I didn't like the idea of handles sticking out away from the outfeed table where you would brush up against them with your knee or whatever. So I wanted to do some integrated handles. These are just a lot of fun, and you can get super creative with them. This is not a new idea or design by any sense of the matter, but I did want to kind of put my own twist on it. So I cut out this little channel and then flush trimmed everything to these plywood drawer fronts. And then I'm going to actually use some walnut trim and trim out this little nook where your hand goes to make it look a little bit more decorative. This is a super tedious process, but I do believe it's going to go a long ways when this is all said and done, and I think it'll almost be kind of like a focal point and make something that would otherwise be super ordinary have a little bit more of an interesting look to it.
Dang it. I just screwed up all of my hard work. I was flush trimming all this. Everything was cut wider than the panel. I did that on purpose because in my head I could flush trim it all perfect afterwards, because I took away some of that veneer on this plywood. Gosh darn it anyway. It looks like now. Both sides too.
For the remainder of these drawer fronts, I went back to the tried and true method that I really should have started with. I just thought it'd be a little quicker and more efficient on the router table, but I'm using my low angle planer and I'm just slowly working my way up to becoming flush with these drawer fronts. Next up on the agenda is attaching these drawer fronts to the actual drawer box. With the help of some 3M double-sided tape, some playing cards, and some shims, I'm able to get all these drawer fronts put on the boxes securely. Now to router out the dados for our T-tracks, and every time I've used my shaper so far, it's ended badly. I have not had one project that just worked out flawlessly. I must be an idiot because I can't get this thing figured out, and this is where things went really south. And this is super frustrating at this point in the build. For some reason, my shaper was having a tough time reading the tape and it got way off. And this track is way too wide, and look how crappy this cut is. This is supposed to be a nice snug fit like it is on the end. Then as I come down, it just decided it's going to make a little jut out right there, and now it's sloppy, way too wide for what I need it for. I don't know what I'm going to do to fix this, and I don't have the time or money to go back and replace all of it. After catastrophic failure, I headed inside and poured myself a stiff glass of bourbon, and the next day I came out and we're just going to push through. I got these cool intersection pieces from PowerTech on Amazon, and these work exactly how I'm showing you here, where they meet in the middle of the intersection, and this saves you a ton of time cutting miters, and they line up really nicely just like this.
One thing that I want to address before I get going on installing all this T-track is you need to leave a little room. Depending on how you designed your slots here, you may want to run them all the way off the edge of the table. Then you could just insert from the side and slide it. I wanted to have a nice clean edge all the way around. So if you're gonna do it the way I did it, I trimmed down these pieces a little bit to give me enough room to insert. I got these hold down clamps, so I just tested them with that. And you need to have enough clearance here to actually get that to fit onto that T-track like that. If you cut them out like I did and you don't trim this off, where this would go all the way flush to the edge of your table, there's going to be no way of inserting anything into the track, which would render it pretty much useless. So for once I was thinking ahead a little bit here, and trimmed down all these that are on the edge of everything.
and then I sanded them a little bit. These are made out of aluminum. You can use the same blade that you use to cut wood. You just need to cut really slow. I spent the next couple days brainstorming a way that I could fill these large gaps and discrepancies in the T-track, and this is what I decided to move forward with. I'm going to fill all these with this hot glue that's used as a knot filler in hopes that it can hide those huge gaps and prevent stuff from falling down in them and just make it look a little bit better. Sometimes life throws you curveballs like this, and you can either mope around and complain about it or find ways to make the situation better. Is this a perfect fix? Absolutely not. But I do have to admit that it was a huge improvement, and it turned out much better than I had anticipated it would. After pressing that glue deep into those cracks, you come along with this little planer and scrape off all of the excess. I've got a little bit of residue left over here that I'll have to clean up with some acetone, but for the most part, this is much better than what I started out with, and I can feel comfortable about moving forward with this. After what seemed like an eternity, my Bloom soft close hinges finally arrived. These were actually full overlay hinges and I needed partial overlay, but I made it work, and these doors really bring the whole front of this together. Using some scrap 1/4-inch plywood that I had laying around, I filled up the back open cavity of this cabinet. I just didn't want extra dust and stuff flying inside the back of the cabinet and making an extra mess. And then I started finishing everything with just some wipe-on finish that is made from Howard's cutting board oil.
I just moved this into place and I did a check on it because I want it to be just a couple 16ths lower than my table, and I don't know if that will show up on camera, but it's a couple 16ths higher than my table. So I put those leg levelers in for this very reason. The only thing that stinks is how heavy this sucker is, but luckily I have dad's strength now. That's perfect.
The last thing is using some of this T9 bow shield. You could use this or any sort of paste wax. It just helps with your glue cleanup. I did it inside of those tracks as well because I figured if glue falls down in there it might be tricky, and that's a wrap on this project. Here's a fun little before and after photo. My old bench just kind of put together quickly, and it got the job done to something a little bit more fancy, and it's much more than just a workbench. It's something that I'm going to build furniture on for many years, and it's going to be a huge tool upgrade, and more than that, an inspiration. I'm going to be inspired to build new and nicer things versus something that would be a lot more ordinary and simple.
The whole time I was working on my new outfeed table, I kept thinking about how crappy this one was and how it's going to be worth it in the end. We overcame some uphill climbs, but here it is, all finished in my shop, and it looks great, but more importantly, this is going to help me become much more efficient, and that is going to be huge. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next build.